Ukraine is coming home, and Russians are panicking because Ukrainians looks like crossed Dnipro river, broke through defenses of the Russian forces and gained the foothold on another side of Kherson region. And it looks like that the battle for Kherson will start in the very near future. And then, even according to the leader of Wagner, Evgeny Prigozhin, Ukrainians brought as many as 400,000 soldiers total for their ultimate grand liberation. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and talk about some other ridiculously cringe material. So, recently, one guy from Krasnodar in Russia, he received this notification booklet about you should join army and serve under the contract. He was just walking around the trade center, he received this booklet, and as we all do, he threw it in the bin 50 meters later. Well, long story short, the police stopped him and said that you just threw the symbols of Russia. We're gonna give you a ticket, and the ticket is worth approximately $500. So pretty much, yes, as you can see, you can get fined for discrediting the Russian army just by throwing the promotional booklets. But okay, then let's talk about some more serious news which are still infused with the Russian propaganda. And long story short, in St. Petersburg, the Russian men started receiving this electronic notification summons along with the electronic military summons, which are not just notifications, but the actual summons. And if you remember, in the past the Russian government was saying like, do not worry, we will never send military summons electronically. You have absolutely nothing to be afraid of. Well, less than a week later, it started happening. Well, and according to them, they said, this is just a test. Don't worry about it, it's not gonna happen again. Right, next we have this article which says that the commander of the Russian Pacific Fleet, Sergei Avakyan, he resigned from his position in less than a week after this surprise inspection. And I mean, it kinda does not look like important news until you realize that some of the separate detachments of the Pacific Fleet in Russia, pretty much the Marines, they were responsible for attacks against Pavlivka and Vuhledar earlier this year and at the end of 2022. And as we already know, all of them completely failed. So then this resignation does not come as a surprise anymore. And then, according to the representatives of the Hungarian government, which is supposed to be a friend of Russia, at least until recently, they said that Russia is no longer a friend to Hungary. They basically said that Russia is only a trade partner, and then such countries as America, which are their allies, these are the countries which are friendly towards Hungary. Because if you remember, several weeks ago Russia included Hungary on this list of unfriendly countries. And while Russia loses the last of its remaining friends, Ukraine only gets more. Because yesterday, the Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, he visited the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. And among the main statements that he made is that Ukraine belongs in NATO, and its membership will be discussed during next NATO summit in Vilnius very soon. And well, speaking about NATO, looks like that Russia just once again switched one of its main goals of its military operation. Previously they said that the main goal is to not let NATO expand, and now according to Dmitry Peskov, the main goal is to not let Ukraine join NATO. So yes, what do you think? Will Ukraine join NATO before the war is over? If you think so, can you please like this video? And if you think that Ukraine will join NATO after the war, can then you please subscribe to my channel? And then I will see the ratio of this like-subscribe. Thank you so much. You can also follow my second channel, The Russian Dude Clips, where I post under 1-minute summaries every single day. The link will be down below. Alright, now please allow me to give you just literally a couple of words about the Western military support to Ukraine. And today we have some very interesting footage. And then we'll talk about the situation in the east and the south of Ukraine, where recently some very intriguing things started to happen. And so yes, as you can see from this first picture, Ukraine started recently using Israeli drones Hero 400 EC. Next we have a picture of a pretty unusual Ukrainian-made armored personnel carrier called Varta Redut, and at this very moment it is estimated that it's only one unit of its produced. Next we have a picture from European training grounds where Ukrainians are practicing to use American M2A2 Bradleys along with Slovenian M55S tanks. And then, as you go to another European country, Spain, a total of number of 6 Leopard 2 tanks have been delivered to the Spanish seaport, and later they'll be transported to Poland before being sent into Ukraine. Don't worry, almost done with this chapter, we're gonna talk about the south and the east very soon. But first, here is another picture of Leopard 2 tanks, and the two countries of Denmark and the Netherlands will send a total of 14 of them to Ukraine. And then, interestingly enough, recently it has been reported that Ukrainians for the very first time used a Turkish military equipment, and right here we have a picture of potentially this equipment we're talking about, which is the multiple launch rocket system TLRG 230. Next we have a video from the Minister of Defense of Ukraine Alexei Reznikov, who is test driving French-wheeled tanks AMX-10RC. And the very last video, right here is the American armored fighting vehicle called Striker, allegedly somewhere in the southern front lines. The additional photos and videos of all of these combat machines presented in today's episode will be available on my Patreon, the link is down below, and there's still 1 week of free access. Alright, and now as promised, let's talk about the updated situation in the south and in the east of Ukraine, and then we'll talk about this hugely anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive, which looks like it might have just begun, and not in the place where everyone anticipated. And so first of all, right here we have a video from Kiev where recently an unidentified object has fallen from the sky. At first, many people thought that this was the Ukrainian air defense system intercepting a Russian missile. The second assumption was that this was the satellite by NASA, which they brought down to Earth, and then NASA gave us the statement that no, this could not have been this satellite because we sunk it in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And then the ultimate version is that most likely this was just a meteorite. Our next stop brings us across the border to Belgorod, where recently another very loud noise have been heard in the city center. Immediately, the Russian propagandists started claiming that this was the attack by Ukrainians. In response to that, Ukrainians said that they were not launching any missiles against Belgorod. And most likely, according to the information available right now, this was the Russian missile or gliding bomb which malfunctioned and fell inside Belgorod. So this was a case of a friendly fire. And to be honest, in order to confirm this version, the official Russian authorities, they said that at this very moment the cause of this loud noise is not yet determined. But then even more ridiculous thing happened in Tula, and basically a Russian multiple launch rocket system S-400, it basically crashed and fell into the ditch, because the driver, who was given the only job, failed it as well. Right, next to go back to Ukraine, and first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians conducted limited offensive next to Crimea and they failed. As we go a little bit back to the north, we can see that Russians were relatively a little bit successful at advancing closer to Kupiansk. And then, back all the way to Bakhmut, we can see that Russians advanced a little bit to the western part of this city. As for now, Bakhmut still stands, and Ukrainians are not planning to give it up, because they still control this road, which leads all the way from Bakhmut to Ivanovsky, which they used to resupply themselves and carry away injured soldiers. And at this very moment, the most intense pressure comes from Russians to capture this road, but Ukrainians are still heroically protecting it. I even have this 11 minutes first-person close combat footage of Ukrainians repelling such of one of these attacks and doing it successfully. And since YouTube will not allow me to show some parts of it, I upload it completely for free on my Patreon. The link will be down below. Next to go a little bit even more to the south to Marinka, where still Russians are trying to capture this completely destroyed city, and we can see this video of a Russian tank which has been attacked by Ukrainian artillery system and destroyed. Our next stop brings us already to Zaporozhye region, and as you can see from this map, Russians kinda advanced a dozen meters closer to Hulyai-Pole. But then, according to once again report by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainians conducted a reconnaissance at force in Zaporozhye region, which is just yet one of the signs that Ukrainians are starting their ultimate counteroffensive, and we will talk about this in more details in just a few seconds. And ultimately, here is a video of a destruction of one of the sea tags somewhere in Zaporozhye region. But so yes, the most interesting things started to happen recently in the south of Ukraine. And we might potentially see the beginning of this well-anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive. Because first of all, we received this video from one of the locals in Nova Kakhovka, and the person mentions that the intensity of fire between Russians and Ukrainians is so big right now he has not heard before. In addition to that, it has also been mentioned that these sounds were coming somewhere very close, most likely even on the opposite side of Dnipro river, which at this very moment is still occupied by Russians. And then we have the similar report from the locals, but this time is already closer to Kherson city and Antonovsky Bridge. And basically what they say is that they hear so much intensity of shooting which they have not heard before. And yes, as well, the majority of these sounds come from the left side of Dnipro river. At the same time, we have some reports by the Russian military correspondents that according to their intelligence, they see that Ukrainian forces already crossed Dnipro river and gained the foothold on the other side of Kherson region. And the Russian soldiers, according to them, are kinda panicking and being very confused, because they were not expecting that Ukrainians will cross like this in the broad daylight and start attacking their positions. But you know what's even worse for Russians, and this still comes from the Russian military correspondence, is that allegedly Ukrainians, besides crossing the river, they kinda organized a temporary relocation point and maybe even a small military base closer to Antonovsky Bridge, and this is when they're using like some kind of a meeting point. And at this very moment, approximately 1 mile away from Antonovsky Bridge on the other side of the river is kinda already contested. We then even have some statements from some Russian soldiers who are saying that yes, we can see Ukrainians, we start shooting them, but whenever we ask the artillery strike on their positions, it is just a one big huge bureaucracy. I mean, we can see the concentration of Ukrainian forces, we want to attack them, but first we need to ask the permission of our commander, then this guy needs to ask the permission of his superiors, and then if they allow to do it, it comes all the way down to the chain of command before we can actually attack. And this is the precious time that Ukrainians use to even bring even more forces. And you know what? The most anticipated location of an upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive was the Zaporozhye region, then it was the east of Ukraine, and only then Kherson region. So potentially this beginning of the Ukrainian ultimate retribution and grand crusade is a little bit unexpected. And well, according to the representative of Vladimir Zelensky, Fyodor Venislavsky, he said that Ukrainian counteroffensive will be a surprise, not just for Russians, but also for Ukrainians. And well, we do have some statements from the Russian side as well, such as for example the leader of Wagner Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is saying that according to his intelligence, Ukrainians have assembled anywhere between 2 to 400,000 soldiers for their ultimate liberation. Prigozhin also said that Russia can never underestimate Ukraine because in addition to that, they assembled a lot of Western military equipment and vehicles, and all of this will be used in the counteroffensive all at once. And just for example, we have videos like this, which shows us the concentration of Ukrainian forces along with the Western military machines. And ultimately, ex-advisor to the president of Ukraine, Alexei Arestovich, he said that Russia might attack Ukraine once again in 2028 or 2029, and he is very certain. And so, the main question of the video is, could this mean that Russia is preparing to freeze the conflict? They are bringing everything they have left to Bakhmut to try and finally, hopefully for them, capture this city so they can announce some kind of victory to its people and then claim that now they are in defense mode. And in the meantime, when the intensity of fighting will be decreased, Russians will be pushing the Western authorities to make Ukrainians negotiate with Russia. And at the same time, during these years of stalemate, Russia will be just once again resupplying their forces. Because right now, Bakhmut is their only real possibility in this war, simply because their forces are exhausted and they will not be able to launch any offensive anywhere else, and they just need this break. And as soon as the situation becomes a little bit more clear, I will definitely make a video update on this, and if you don't want to miss it, just please consider subscribing to my channel. It only takes one click. The best way to support my channel is through my Patreon. You can also unlock exclusive badges by becoming my channel member, or you can just use a PayPal link. Everything can be found on the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.